Script: most people donate old clothes without knowing that there is a teaching within Kabbalah, kept for generations in the most inner study circles, that precisely describes what happens spiritually when you do it the wrong way. Stay here. Don't leave yet, because what I'm about to show you won't make you stop giving clothes. It will make you understand what you are giving when you give, and how to do it in a way that protects what is yours and still blesses those who receive. There is a teaching that circulated in the study circles of Kabbalah and saved, rarely left those rooms, rarely explained to the general public, that says the following: the clothing you wear is not just fabric. It is a levish, Levush, garment, wrapping. But in the Kabbalistic system, this word carries a weight that goes far beyond physical clothing. Because the levish is, according to the teachings of the Zohar, the outermost layer of the neshama, the film between your inner world and the world around you. And when you wear a piece of clothing for years, on days of joy, on days of achievement, in moments of prayer, in moments of growth, that piece absorbs something of who you are, an impression, an energetic trace, what the wise called rishimu. Rishimu, R-E-S-H-I-M-U, trace, residual impression, the mark that remains after the passage of something. And this impression, this rishimu of your personal mazel, of your energy, of your accumulated spiritual presence, does not disappear when you wash the piece. It does not go away when you store it at the back of the closet. It remains in the fabric as the memory remains in a photograph. And when you give that piece, unintentionally, unconsciously, without the correct spiritual framing, you are giving along with it something that belongs to the field of your life. This is not superstition. It is a principle documented in Kabbalistic text with a depth that will surprise you today. And the most important thing, there is a right way to do this, a way that preserves what is yours and still conveys blessing to those who receive. And this way, this specific practice, is what most people have never learned. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt something strange after giving away a piece of clothing that had a lot of emotional memories? A feeling that it left more than just fabric? Tell me. Before diving into the teachings, I need to open something that is rarely said outside of study circles. There is an old debate within Kabbalistic literature between two understandings of what a human being is in the physical world. The first understanding, the most popular, the most superficial, says that a human being is a pure soul trapped in a physical body, and that the physical is an obstacle, a limitation, something that the soul needs to overcome. The second understanding, the deeper one, which the greatest Kabbalists defended, says something radically different, that the physical is sacred, that the body is not a prison of the soul, it is its instrument of manifestation, that the physical objects surrounding the human being are not neutral, they are extensions of the person's spiritual field, and that among all physical objects, the levish, the garment, occupies a special position. Because of all the objects that exist in the world, none is in such intimate and continuous contact with the human body as clothing. No object receives as much of the rishimu of the neshama as the fabric that envelopes it. This is what made the teaching about the levish a serious subject of study, not popular folklore, in the greatest centers of Kabbalistic wisdom in history. In this video, you will discover three things. First, what exactly is the levish according to Kabbalah? And why did the sages teach that clothing is the living boundary between a person's inner world and the external world? Second, what happens spiritually when you donate a piece of clothing without awareness? And why certain specific items carry such a strong rishimu that giving without intention can compromise the field of your mazel? Third, how to donate clothes correctly. The spiritual process that transforms the act of donation from a potential loss into a transmission of blessing for you and for the recipient. But first of all, I need to tell you the story of Rizel. Imagine a woman named Rizel, a seamstress. She arrived in Brazil with little, but with two things intact: the skilled hands she inherited from her mother and a knowledge of fabric and clothing that went far beyond the professional. This story came to me through the family as a teaching parable, and I ask that you listen to it as such. Rizel sewed for the local Jewish community, but she had a reputation that went beyond the quality of her work. She had what people called the eye for fabric. She could look at a piece of clothing and say things about it that were not visible to those who did not know how to see. One day, A client brought an old dress from her deceased mother and asked Rizel to transform it into something new for her granddaughter. Rizel took the fabric, fell silent for a moment, and ran her hand slowly over it. And then she said, "This dress should not be transformed. It should be kept as it is, or given whole to someone who will honor it. If I cut this fabric to make something different, I will break what is inside it." The client did not fully understand, but she trusted, and the dress was kept. When the granddaughter grew up and asked why that dress was in the box and never used, the mother told her what Rizel had said, and the granddaughter, who had developed her own interest in spirituality, went to seek the explanation that Rizel had left incomplete. It was in the teachings of the Levish that she found the answer. Rizel was not mystical. She was practical, but her practice was rooted in an understanding that most people had never received, that the fabric that envelopes a human being over years of life, especially a life lived with integrity and spiritual depth, carries a rishimu that should not be carelessly dispersed. Let's enter the first teaching, the Levish in Kabbalah. The word Levish first appears in depth in the teachings of the Zohar, the central book of Jewish mysticism, where it is used to describe the different layers that envelop the neshama as it descends from the higher worlds to the physical world. In the system of Arizal, Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist of Seif from the 16th century, each level of the soul has a corresponding levish, the specific wrapping that allows that level of soul to function within the parameters of that level of reality. And at the outermost level, the level of the guf, the physical body, the levish is literally the garment, the clothing. But what the Arizal taught that few understand is the following. The levish is not passive. It is not simply what the soul wears as a coat. The levish is an intermediate field. It is the place where the interior meets the exterior, where the spirit meets the world. And just as the skin of the human body is not merely a covering, it is a sensory organ, an immune barrier, a regulatory system. The spiritual levish of the garment is not just a covering. It is an active energy field. It receives impressions from the interior, from the ruach, the spirit of the person, and transmits them to the exterior. And it receives impressions from the exterior and transmits them to the interior. Ruach, R-U-A-C-H, spirit, wind. The second level of the soul in the Kabbalistic structure, IT, is the level that carries deep emotions, relational patterns, and the quality of a person's emotional life. And it is exactly the Ruach, with all its richness of emotions, experiences, growth, or pain, that imprints more deeply on the physical levish over time. Think about how many hours of your life you spend dressed in your favorite clothes. How many important conversations, how many significant decisions, how many joys and sorrows happened while you wore certain pieces. How many prayers, how many family meals, how many work achievements. The rishimu of the ruach deposits itself in the levish with the regularity of use and the depth of lived moments. And this deposit, this accumulated impression, is what the wise called or halevish, bar H-E-L-E-V-U-S-H, the light of the garment. The specific energetic quality that a piece of clothing acquires over a lifetime of conscious use. Not every garment has a strong or halevish that a shirt bought to wear once has little value. But the clothing you wear regularly, in moments of significance, the work clothes you dedicated yourself to, the outfit for family celebrations, the piece you wore when you prayed, when you studied, when you made the most important decisions of your life. This accumulates or halevish with a density that the wise took very seriously. And here we come to the central point, to what happens when you give this clothing. The Kabbalistic teachings about levish distinguish between two types of clothing transfer. The first type is called kibbud halevish, K-I-B-B-U-D-H-E-L-E-V-U-S-H, the honored transfer of clothing, a conscious, intentional transmission accompanied by a clear spiritual intention, where the or halevish is deliberately released before the transfer or consciously transmitted as a blessing for the recipient. The second type, and this is what most people do unknowingly, is called pgam halevish, P-G-M-H-E-L-E-V-U-S-H, the damage of the garment. The unconscious transfer, without intention, without release, without awareness of what is being moved along with the fabric. And pgam halevish has two simultaneous effects that the sages described clearly. The first effect, the or halevish, goes along with the piece. The rishimu of your ruach, of your history with that clothing, of your mazel accumulated in that field. All of this follows the fabric to the hands of the recipient. You do not lose the mazel as if it were an essence that simply migrates. You disperse the energy field that had been built over time, and this dispersion creates, in the field of your spiritual levish, a discontinuity. The second effect, and this is more subtle but equally documented in the texts, is that the or halevish of another person can reach you through the clothing you receive. When you wear second-hand clothes without any spiritual preparation, you are potentially absorbing the rishimu of the ruach of the person who wore them before, with all their emotional history, their patterns, their experiences. This is not a statement that used clothes are forbidden or dangerous. It is not that. It is that consciousness matters, and that there is a process, a specific practice, that cleans the levish of previous impressions and prepares it to receive the or halevish of the new bearer. Let me tell you how this teaching came practically to Rizel. Still in the context of our family parable, in Rizel's community, there was a family that was going through a period of great prosperity. The patriarch had built a solid business. The family had grown in health and harmony. There was a quality of shifa, of abundance, that everyone around perceived. And then the patriarch, in an act of genuine generosity, decided to do a big cleaning of the wardrobe. He filled bags, work clothes, party clothes, clothes that had been used during years of building the business. He gave it all away in an afternoon. He felt light afterward. He felt virtuous. But in the following months, something that no one could explain rationally began to happen. Businesses that were on track fell apart. Decisions that seemed clear became confusing. A kind of disorientation that was not dramatic but was constant. When the wife talked to Rizel about it, not asking for a spiritual explanation, just venting, Rizel listened in silence and then asked, "And the wardrobe?" The wife described what had happened. Rizel was quiet for a moment and said, "He gave the or halevish along with the clothes. He did not do the hakana beforehand. He did not clear the field. It all came out together, the fabric and what the fabric carried. Hakana, H-A-K-H-A-N-H, preparation, readiness. The spiritual process of preparing an object for a transition. And then Rizel taught his wife the process. The practice I will give you now, and that the family has preserved since then. But before the practices, I need to give you the third teaching, the deepest of the three, because until now we have talked about what the levish carries and what can be dispersed. But there is a dimension of the levish that goes beyond individual protection, that has to do with tikkun. Tikkun, T-K-K-U-N, correction, realignment, restoration. One of the most central concepts of all Kabbalah. The teachings of Arizal on Tikkun describe that each human soul has a specific work of correction to perform in this world. A set of experiences, relationships, situations that it needs to go through to complete the mission for which it was sent. And the levish, the garment, participates in this tikkun in a specific way. There are pieces of clothing that you wear in moments of real tikkun, moments where you genuinely grew, where you overcame an old pattern, where you became a better version of yourself, where you acted with yashir and anava when it would have been easier not to act that way. These pieces accumulate not only generic or halevish, they accumulate what the wise called or hatikkun, the light of the spiritual correction process experienced while that garment was on the body. And this or hatikkun is extremely precious. It is the distillation of who you have become through specific experiences, and transmitting it without intention, throwing it in a donation bag on a cleaning afternoon, is, according to the wise, to waste something that took years to build. But, and this is the point that transforms everything, the or hatikkun can be transmitted intentionally. It can be given as a genuine blessing. It can pass from you to the recipient in a way that blesses both. When you perform kibbud halevish correctly, when you carry out the hakanah, when you release the or with intention, when you pray for the well-being of the one who will receive, what happens is not lost. It is multiplication. Because the light that you intentionally release does not leave you. It leaves a trace of kedusha, of holiness, in your own field. A mark of conscious generosity that strengthens rather than weakens. This is the fundamental difference between Pgam halevish and kibbud halevish. Pgam, you give without awareness. The light goes away. The field weakens. Kibbud, you give with awareness and intention. The light is transmitted as a blessing. The field of the giver is strengthened by the sacred act of conscious transmission. There is an additional teaching that the circles of safe preserved about a specific type of clothing that should never be given without a special process. They called it Begd Hanashama. Begd Hanashama, BGDHANESHAMA, the clothing of the soul. Specific pieces that, for some reason beyond logic, have become deeply associated with your spiritual identity. Not necessarily the most beautiful or the most expensive, but those that, when you wear them, something in you feels more whole, more aligned, more yourself. You probably have at least one of these. It could be a work piece that you wore at your best presentations. It could be something you inherited from someone you loved. It could be a simple garment that, for reasons you can't explain rationally, always makes you feel protected when you wear it. The Begd Hanashama should never be given impulsively, never on a cleaning afternoon where you are in automatic mode of, I don't wear this anymore. It goes in the bag. Because that kind of decision in automatic mode, without presence, without intention, is exactly what the Pgam HaLevish describes. The Begd Hanashama, if the time has come to pass it on, deserves a deliberate process, an honest question, for whom, why, with what intention, and a specific practice of releasing the or before the transmission, which I will give you now. Before the practices, I want to pause here for a second, because I am aware that all of this may raise a question. Isn't this going to make me accumulate clothes? Isn't it going to create the opposite, a material attachment to clothing that is spiritually problematic? It is a legitimate question, and the wise asked it too, and their answer was clear. The problem was never giving. The problem was giving without awareness. The Jewish tradition is deeply committed to tzedakah, to generosity as a fundamental spiritual practice. Giving clothes to those in need is not only permitted, it is a mitzvah. It is a sacred act. It is a direct expression of genuine chesed. But mitzvah, mitzvah, means commandment, and in the deepest sense, connection. And a mitzvah performed with awareness and intention has infinitely more spiritual power than an act of generosity performed automatically. What the teachings about Levish ask is not for you to accumulate. They ask that you be conscious, that the act of giving clothes be an act of intention, not of automatic disposal, that you distinguish between what can be given directly and what needs hakanah beforehand. And that, when you give, especially the pieces of greater or halevish, you do so as kibbud, as honor, as a conscious transmission of blessing to the one who will receive it. Because clothing given with genuine kibbud, clothing that carries a prayer for the well-being of the one who will wear it, has the power to convey a quality of protection to the recipient that goes far beyond the fabric. This is the chesed of Levish. And this chesed, when practiced with awareness, strengthens both sides of the transmission. There is an aspect of Levish that Rizel taught her children, and that was not in any book. It was in the practical wisdom of generations. It was about festive clothing, the clothes you wear in Simcha, STMCHA, in celebration, weddings, bar mitzvahs, family gatherings, the moments of collective joy that mark life. Rizel taught, never part with a used garment in true Simcha without first sitting with it for a moment and consciously recalling the joy of that day, not as nostalgia, as an act of gratitude, as a sealing of the or that garment accumulated at that specific moment. Genuine joy, she said, leaves a light in the fabric that can last for generations. And when you recall that joy with gratitude before giving the piece away, you do not disperse it, you condense it. And condensed, it goes whole to the recipient. This is the practical wisdom of Kibbud HaLevish. It is not a complicated ritual. It is attention. It is the difference between throwing something away and passing something on. Now the practices. Concrete. Applicable from today. Practice number 1, the Levish inventory. Before any clothing donation, before opening the closet with the intention of doing a clean-out, perform what the sages called Cheshbon HaBegd. Cheshbon HaBegd, CHESHBON-HABGD, the inventory of clothing. Separate the clothes into 3 categories. The first category, recently worn and everyday clothes, without particular memories of significant moments. These can be donated directly with the simple blessing prayer that I will give you. The second category, clothes with significant or halevish, pieces worn during moments of growth, achievement, genuine joy, simcha. These need hakanah before being passed on. The third category, the Begd Hanashama, pieces of deep spiritual identity. These require special discernment, and an honest question about whether it is really the time to pass them on and to whom. Doing this sorting with awareness, instead of just throwing everything in a bag, is the first act of Kibbutz HaLevish. Practice number 2, the Hakanah, the preparation of the levish, for the clothes of the second category, those of significant or HaLevish. Perform this process before passing them on. First, hold the piece with both hands. Be silent for a moment. Consciously bring to mind the most significant moments you experienced while wearing this clothing, not as a prolonged emotional exercise, but as an act of recognition. 1 to 2 minutes. Second, express gratitude in an audible voice for what this clothing represented. It can be simple. I am grateful for what I experienced while wearing this, for the growth that occurred, for the memories that stay with me. Third, say the intentional release of the Or, Yehi Ratzon Milfaneka, Adonai Eloheinu, Shilbash Ze Habeg Bishlimet. Yirat Zion. May it be your will before you, eternal our God, that whoever wears this clothing wears it with completeness. This declaration is not a magic formula. It is the act of consciously separating the Or from your personal history with the piece and transforming it into an open blessing for the one who will receive it. That it is the difference between Pgam and Kibbutz. And then the clothing can be transmitted, clean in intention, carrying conscious blessing instead of unconscious dispersion. Practice number 3, the simple donation prayer. For the first category of clothing, those with little or HaLevish accumulated, complete Hakanah is not necessary. But there is still a practice that transforms the act of discarding into an act of conscious chesed. When placing each item in the donation bag, say internally or out loud, may whoever receives this be blessed with what they need. 1 sentence, 6 words. But the difference between throwing something in a bag and transmitting something with intention, because any act performed with genuine intention has a different quality than an act performed automatically. And the intention, the kavanah, is what transforms a mundane gesture into a mitzvah. Practice number 4, the Beged Haneshama process. For third category garments, the Beged Haneshama, pieces of deep spiritual identity. The practice is longer, and it should take place in a moment of deliberate calm, not in the middle of a cleaning session. Sit with the piece, not mechanically, with real presence. Ask 3 questions. Why has this piece come to the point of being considered for transmission? Is it the real moment, or is it a momentary impulse? If the moment is real, for whom? Is there someone specific to whom this piece could go as a genuine blessing? Someone whose life could be touched not just by the fabric, but by the light it carries. Is there something I need to do before transmitting? Any memory that needs to be completed, any gratitude that needs to be expressed, so that the light is condensed instead of dispersed? Answer these 3 questions honestly, and only transmit when the answers are clear, because a Beged Haneshama transmitted to the right person at the right time, with the right intention, can be one of the most powerful acts of chesed you have ever performed. It can carry for the recipient or that has the power to influence the person's spiritual field in ways that go far beyond clothing. Rizel knew this. That's why she said she didn't cut certain fabrics. That's why she waited until she knew for whom and how. Practice number 5, the spiritual bath of the received levish. This practice is for when you receive clothing, whether as a donation, inheritance, or secondhand. Before wearing it for the first time, there is a process of tahora, purification, release of previous impressions that the teachings recommend. The process is simple. Wash the item before the first use, not just for physical cleanliness, as a conscious act of releasing the previous rishimo. And while washing, say, Misafatim Yidaher, through the water, may it be purified. A simple phrase that directs spiritual intention towards the physical act of washing. Then, when using it for the first time, take a moment of awareness. This levish is now mine. May it absorb my ruach, my path. A declaration of spiritual reinauguration of the piece. This is not elaborate superstition. It is the practice of awareness applied to everyday life. It is the kedusha, the holiness, that transforms mundane acts into meaningful spiritual acts. I want to be honest about what to expect from these practices. They will not make money appear because you stopped wearing the wrong clothes. They will not resolve financial blockages as an immediate result of a well-done hakanah. What they do is deeper and more lasting. They develop in you a quality of awareness, an attention to the sacred within the everyday. That, when practiced consistently, changes the quality of your presence in the world. The person who treats their own clothing with spiritual awareness is developing the muscle of what the wise call Dathaguf, D-A-T-H-A-G-U-F, the knowledge of the body. The wisdom of inhabiting the physical world with genuine spiritual intention. And this quality of presence, the one that sees the sacred in the everyday, the one that acts with intention even in the simplest acts, is the soil where genuine prosperity takes root. Not because there is a magic formula linking clothing and money, but because those who live with this depth of intention in all aspects of life, including the most mundane, are operating at a level of spiritual integration that produces results that pure effort could never achieve. Rizal was not rich in the conventional sense of the word, but there was in her life, according to the parable that the family preserved, a quality of wholeness, a sense that nothing was wasted, that everything that passed through her hands had been honored, that the physical world, for her, was an extension of the spiritual and not an obstacle to it. That was Asher of Rizal, and he was real, a final reflection before the blessing. The teachings about the Levish are, at their core, about one thing only, that everything you touch with genuine intention becomes sacred, and that everything you touch without awareness remains mundane. Your clothing, your money, your words, your relationships, the time you have, the attention you give. The difference between Pgam and Kibud is not the object. It is the awareness you bring to the object. And when you begin to practice this awareness in one place, even in a place as unexpected as the wardrobe, it starts to expand. It positively contaminates other areas. It creates a quality of presence that transforms the ordinary into the sacred. This is the teaching that Rizal carried without a sophisticated theological name, that the fabric that envelopes the body is also the fabric of the spirit, and that they deserve the same care. Tell me in the comments, do you have a begged Hanashama, a piece that carries a special meaning in your life? You don't have to tell me what it is. Just tell me, does it exist? And if after this video you look at your wardrobe with different eyes, that is already the first act of Kibud HaLevish. And now, before you go, there are words that need to be said about you, because your time is now. Not the time to wait for the perfect moment to start living with intention. Not the time to save spiritual practices for when you have more time, or more energy, or fewer problems. The moment you start treating the everyday as sacred, this afternoon, this wardrobe, this clothing in your hands, is the moment when the sacred begins to reveal itself in the everyday. Go. Now, open the closet with new eyes. Touch the pieces that carry history with the respect they deserve. And when you pass them on with blessing, not with discard. Because you are not just a consumer of fabric, you carry and the that you carry and care for blesses everything and everyone it touches. It is written about you, that your levish shines. May the HaLevish that you have accumulated through years of living with intention be recognized, honored, and transmitted as a blessing when the time is right, to whom it is meant, in the way that is sacred. It is written that no unconscious Pgam shall disperse what has been built with years of genuine growth. It is written that the Kibud you practice, in small acts, in everyday gestures, in seemingly trivial choices, be the foundation of a life of wholeness. Go, with awareness, with intention, with the that you carry. Your time is now. Amen. In the next video, I will reveal to you something that the teachings call Simcha Shel Mitzvah, joy as a condition for prosperity, and not as its result, the teaching that completely reverses the order in which most people think about happiness and abundance. And that has roots in one of the most celebrated texts in all of Jewish literature. Don't miss it. Subscribe, activate the bell, and this week, do the Cheshbon HaBegged. Look at your wardrobe with awareness. And the next time you are about to pass on a piece of significant or HaLevish, do the Hakanah. Make a difference. Peace.